Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the last keynote, but not the least. So please give Stine a huge applause just for putting this together. Yeah. Good. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so before I start, just to allow you to have a little bit of blood circulation, unless you have bad knees or back pain, don't feel obliged, but if you do feel a need to stand up and shake a little, 30 seconds to get some blood to the brain, and then we'll finish this off. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what your dashboards don't see. I think the CX industry is sleeping on a huge business potential, and I'm going to try and hopefully plant a few thoughts in your minds about this. So for many of you, probably your satisfaction scores look fine, or when you look at them, you know what you have to work with. The problem with satisfaction scores is that they only show you the customers who made it through. Some time ago, in 1 week, I received 11 different Net Promoter Score surveys. And one thing is they all look the same, so it's not like I feel they really care, because I just got one from another company that's asking the exact same thing. So 11 surveys. And I don't know if you're like me, but I answered absolutely none of them, because I cannot be bothered to donate my time to develop your company unless I'm super passionate about what you do, right? So we heard Johnny talk about an NPS of 70, and just for any NPS nerds out there, I'm very well aware that us asking an NPS question, would you recommend someone to go through security, is not an option. So we got a little bit of a score given to us because we had to just ask what was the experience on a scale from 0 to 10, right? But there are companies out there who look at this and be like, our NPS is 70, we love it, we're great. And then my question would be, what's your response rate? Too low, exactly. Many companies will send out an email and you will maybe have a response rate of 25 if you do really well. Right? So the way some companies do it is that, and then obviously there are other ways to get your response rate up. Maybe you're there and you meet the customer and you talk to them, all good. But still, let's operate with the idea that your response rate is 25. Your score is not interesting. What's really interesting is the 75% that never answered your survey. That's where the business potential is. So the customers in your journeys that face the most friction will not answer your survey. They just leave quietly or talk about you badly to other potential customers. So when I am consulting for companies, what I see very often is this blind celebration of a score. We moved up 4 points, or we moved whatever. But that score is only interesting if you supplement it with something. Because what that is survival-based bias. You're celebrating the customers that made it through, who found you, who chose you, survived, had time to tell the tale, had the cognitive capacity to tell you the tale, or thought that telling you the tale would make a difference. And most of you are listening to the wrong customers. And I did too. As well as Johnny, I thought I got my shit under control in the airport. I was part of this team where we were winning awards left and right, and everything was great. However, a project landed in my lap that forced me to listen to voices I had never heard before. Because we had to develop disability awareness training, and it wasn't like I was foresighted and inclusive and thought, oh, this is groundbreaking to do this, but I started mapping the customer journey from a disability perspective because of that training. So I spoke with people going through the airport space that are dyslexic, who has ADHD, like myself, who are autistic, who is using wheelchairs, all of that. And the tale that they told was interesting because what I could see was many of them experienced the same types of barriers. And I'll get back to why this is also interesting for you, even if you're running a B2B company. So all of these different conditions had something in common, and it was this. Sometimes I'm left feeling stupid, I'm feeling shamed, I'm feeling misunderstood, overwhelmed by staff instructions, rules, regulations, processes I don't understand, and maybe I'm not finding the information that I need. Now, I'm going to share a few of those stories with you. This is a deaf passenger who said, I avoid service staff at all costs. That should wake up anyone who's trying to sell cups of coffee or whatever might be in your stores. He did so because he has a deaf accent, so when he speaks, he's treated often like someone who's an idiot. And he says, that gives me social anxiety, so I avoid it. Now, obviously you'll think to yourself, or maybe you are thinking to yourself, okay, but how many deaf customers do we really have? The thing is, it could also have been someone who's not a native speaker, who struggles to say the words in the right way. My wife is French, and while people joke about going to France and they don't want to understand you when you try your French, you should try to not be Danish and live in Denmark and try to speak to people here. The amounts of what, though, gives you anxiety and stops you from wanting to try. It could have been a tourist, it could have been someone dyslexic who knows that when I ask this question, they're going to be like, just read the sign. Could be someone with a visual impairment who can't read the menu and then just doesn't want to ask. I spoke with Christian, who's a dyslexic passenger. He has his own consultancy company, but to get the help he needs, he said, I'll pretend to be stupid, because then I don't get the shaming of not being able to read, and I don't have to explain, yeah, but I'm dyslexic, etc. I spoke with Anne, who's autistic and lives with ADHD. She's a former police officer and a prosecutor, and she said, before I call customer service, I prepare for days, I make a script for myself, and I have it also in English in case they don't speak Danish. And then when I call up, if they ask me something that I didn't prepare for, I'll feel overwhelmed. And sometimes then they get upset with me because they feel that I'm being impolite because I ask in a way where it's obvious that I'm irritated, but really I'm just losing it. And so I have to hang up and then I have to call back, because she's feeling shamed, and the guilt of not being able to figure this out in the way that the agent wanted her to makes her hang up. That is a cost. Now, why is this also relevant for B2B? So I was doing a consultancy job for a company who is in the multi-million euro type industry, let's say power plants, that kind of stuff. And I was hired to interview their customers about how did they come to the conclusion that they should be invited to the tender process. And it was also to make sure that their website and communication was performing, because they just relaunched a website, so they were really curious. So this is the type of buying process that takes 10, 20 years. And what came up in all of the interviews that I made was that their website was all about their technology, and I don't understand the amount of gas from chimney or the burning of the things that, So what we did is that we visited previous clients to understand the product and what it does. So what the company thought was their great sales channel, this website that was built for their engineers on their best days, was actually not that great. What mattered most was their after-sales service, because that's how the buying decisions were made. So I'm not saying this person was dyslexic or had any type of hidden disability. However, if they had tailored their website as though it was for someone who isn't an engineer with a PhD in waste energy systems, for instance, that would maybe be a person who had found what they were looking for on their site. So every customer experience is designed around this assumption about who the customer is. And I want you to just think about this. As a customer, when was the last time you were made to feel stupid? And I'll share mine. It was last week. I did a whole LinkedIn post about it. I was in the process of trying to figure out how I get a better CRM system. And I get an email that is longer than I want to tell you about. You can go and read the LinkedIn post, right? It was so complicated. My response to this company, who is promising me that I'll be able to deliver smoother customer experiences for people like you, my reply was, I know someone who has a PhD in applied mathematics. I'll get back to you when he's had a chance to look at it, because that's how complicated it was. I was listening in on calls for an insurance company at one point, and it was about figuring out what conflicts arise in the customer calls. And so there was a call with a customer who, he was really energetic, and the agent was speaking to him, and then they got to the point where she said, okay, but so how, the way you do this claim is that you go on our website and you do this and you click there and then you print it, and once we have it, then something. And he said, oh, okay. And she said, okay, thank you, and we hung up. And she was like, that was really great. There was no, usually that was a conversation that could bring a conflict about. And I said, did you notice the drop in tone? Yeah, he didn't yell at you, but I also think maybe he's dyslexic, or maybe he doesn't have a printer. I don't know. But the energy shifted so hard, and that's an energy that doesn't show up in your numbers. So think about the experiences you deliver with the company you are based in. Most companies are designing their customer experience based on the customer on their best day. We have these personas, we know what they eat, how they shop, we give them personalities. But most people, they're just not on their best day. 1 in 4 people live with a hidden disability. That's 25% of your customers. It's also 25% of your employees, by the way. And now, obviously, it's not a hidden disability to not have a Scandinavian background, right? The reason I have it up here is that the cognitive load of navigating text, websites, shops, things like that, in a language that is not your own, it takes a lot more effort than a lot of people think about. So navigating life in general with an increased cognitive load. And the same is true for anyone going through a divorce, grief, stress, burnout. So one of the most powerful lenses, if you want to have a really smooth customer journey, is to think about designing for people that are not on their best days. Because full bandwidth is not the norm. Yet we have these picture-perfect personas that we think will navigate smoothly through our journeys. So what is the business case of this? Now, just as an example of the airport, so 1 out of 4 avoiding service staff at all cost. Maybe it's not all of the 1 in 4. So let's just say 25% of those 25%. In an airport that had 30 million passengers and coffee costing 30 krona, that is a huge business case, above 56 million. I don't know what that figure is for your business in terms of allowing your customers to navigate more smoothly on your website to that purchase button, or get through quicker and better with a customer service agent who doesn't feel insulted when someone starts talking to them in a way they feel they shouldn't. And for that multi-million euro business that I spoke about, not being invited to the tender because the website was written for their own engineers on their best days, that's a huge business case. So the barriers that the customers you have that live with hidden disabilities face, they are not edge cases. They are the most powerful lens you could apply to, in fact, deliver smoother journeys. They are design flaws, and they're hiding in plain sight, and it is costing you revenue. So what my advice to you in terms of delivering measurable business results is to stop designing for your average user and start designing for these edge cases. Because it's very hard to think about, oh, what would it be like for someone going through grief or divorce? What would it be like for someone who's stressed? But what you can do is push some of your communication, for instance. Just audit your communication as the first step. Think about your 3 top customer-facing assets. And if you don't have the capacity to invite an NGO in, or someone like me, or whatever, to audit that, or to map those kinds of journeys that I spoke about, pop it into ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, have it review it for accessibility and understandability, and put it back out there. Because then they will read for anyone who is also just on a hard day and not operating at full capacity. The other thing add qualitative data to that dashboard, find those 75%. Be curious about the customers who left you. I know it's cheap and easy to send out those surveys and make a pop-up on a website, but there is so much business potential to be found from actually maybe asking a new customer to monitor what they go through, send you screenshots of what you put them through. You will be surprised at what you don't see, because one department decided to make this pop-up, and another department decided to send a newsletter, and a third department is sending a text. Every silo invented whatever they thought was great, and the customer might sit with all of that stuff that lands between the silos, the touch point between the silos, and not be able to navigate your journey, and maybe cost you more in calls to your call center or whatever. And the third thing is try to design the next customer journey from the edges. Really try to think about, even if you're in a B2B company, you also have customers that are dyslexic, who need to read through your processes and read through your sites, those types of things. So pick one of those projects and add one persona that is an edge case. And depending, obviously, on what type of industry you're in, different personas might fit. But pick someone who is dyslexic, autistic, with ADHD and a visual impairment, and you are covered, and you will make great customer journeys for anyone on their worst day. If it works for them, it works for everyone. So my leaving note for you is this: design for the edges, and it will improve for everyone. You'll win the whole market. Thank you.